so we have a DuroMax XP13000HXT. It's a tri-fuel generator. Customer saying that it's not running under gasoline. He had it in some mode where he was able to get it to run under propane, but not gasoline, and then he started having some other issues. So we're going to start with the basics. First thing I do is check fuel. I'll pull the strainer out and look in there to see if there's any kind of debris or anything that looks like there's fluid separation and or discolor, and everything looks like it should. Now we'll go ahead and check the oil level. I'm gonna grab a little piece of paper towel. So we'll pull this out and see where we are on the dipstick. So I wipe it off, and then what you do is you set it in there, don't screw it down. And I am not getting anything on there. So that could be why he's having some running issues. So, and when I...
What does the little yellow tag that you removed say?
And the note says the engine is shipped from the factory without oil. Fill with 30-way oil before starting and do not overfill.
And then remove that little tag, right?
Yeah, and it does look like there's oil, but when I look down in here, it is way down here. And the oil, if you look at this dipstick, it's pretty much supposed to be almost to the very top. So we're gonna go ahead and top this oil level off because it's clearly way too low.
I got a pipe straight to the dinosaurs.
Oh yes. Makes it so much easier. So I'm just resetting my gauge on here so I know how much oil I'm pumping in here. And if I had to guess, we're probably going to be anywhere from quarter quart to half. Okay, so we're at half or a quarter, and I can tell it's still way too low. We're getting there, yeah. I think we're about at least a half quart low. So I'm gonna put a half quart in.
I bet you're an entire crankcase low.
Yeah, so let's see where we're at now. I've seen it a lot easier. And yeah, see, we're just now getting on this dipstick. So we're probably about a quarter, almost a quarter quart low from this. Trying to go slow because I don't want to overfill. Well, if I overfill, it's just coming out. And technically that is where it's completely full. And it looks like it's a 3/4 low. All right, so we're just coming out. And yeah, 0.73 quarts. So let me put this back. And it was just starting to drip a little bit. And make sure this is clean. And now when I check it, it is way up here. So we're going to go ahead and screw this down. And we are going to try to start this up on gasoline just as it stands. So to do that, you have to switch this valve here to propane, propane and gasoline. And then you got, this seems a little loose, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. I've seen these, unfortunately, sometimes where they become loose, and you can strip the little plastic. This is all basically just plastic, and you can essentially round that. So make sure that's nice and snug. Yeah, that's now nice and snug as it should. I'm gonna switch it over to gasoline. Turn on battery, auto idle off, and then make sure fuel valve is on over here. And now everything should be ready. Choke is on. We should be able to just hit this and it should fire up. We'll give it a few attempts. Okay, so it doesn't seem like it's starting right away. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it a little bit of help me juice. And how I generally will do that is sometimes you can take this little breather tube off. That's right here going into the air filter housing. Get your tube for your starter spray and get it down to just where the choke flap is, and inject some fluid just inside there. And just like that. Now you don't want to get too crazy on the starter fluid, and you just got to be careful.
This is another one where it'll hand yank this one.
Yeah, and it should hand yank just fine. So if I'm going to start it this way, turn on the battery here.
Do it with the, see if the
yeah.
if it'll electric start.
Yeah, so we'll go back to electric start real quick. So I shot a little starter fluid in there. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure the choke is on. Everything's good, and attempt to start. Okay, so it did fire up for a second, then die. So that tells me we got spark, we have compression, we have timing. Let me shoot a little bit more in here, just see if we can help her. Yeah, so I hit that several times, and it would attempt every single time when I shot some starter fluid in there. So what that tells me is we are not getting fuel through that carburetor. So the next thing we need to do is we need to see if we are getting fuel down to the carburetor. So we have several fuel valves. We have one that's right here. So this is a fuel valve. And then we have one right off the gas tank right here, which is another fuel valve. And so quickly, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna disconnect this and see if we get a little bit of fuel out of that, just to confirm that this fuel valve is working. So I'm gonna turn this off first, and then grab grab some pliers, and then pull this clamp back. I always like to rock these back and forth, just kind of break it loose, and then gently from the back try to pull it forward. Now let's see, it does look like we get a little bit of fuel from that line, so it does feel like it was getting fuel, but let's see. So we are getting good fuel flow, so that's good. So now we're going to go ahead and reinstall this. And to test that valve down there, what I'm going to do is I got to disconnect the fuel line to the carburetor. So in order to do that, unfortunately, we got to remove this air filter assembly. Let's set these up here. And then we have a 10 mil here, 10 mil here, and usually there's a 10 or an 8 mil right behind here. So let me grab those wrenches or sockets. And we're gonna take these off.
Well, if the gas tank is empty, that doesn't mean it's
And then take this one off.
The oil. Well, and just double check it.
And then back here, it's an 8 mil. And sometimes these are a little bit of a pain to get to. Let's see if I can do it just behind. There we go. All right, so just pulled out this 8 millimeter bolt, and I'm going to be careful to put.
Fuel shut off solenoid. Maybe that's what they use to keep the float ball from draining.
So this is to shut it off. So what the fuel solenoid is here for is when the engine's running and you go to turn it off.
Yeah.
And this plunger comes up and blocks the fuel flow from the main jet to allow fuel to come up through the main jet and into the combustion chamber. If you didn't have that there, what happens is when you shut this off, the engine's going to rotate quite a few revolutions. And what's going to happen there is you're going to dump, especially if this was running for a long period of time and this exhaust is nice and hot, what's going to happen is it's going to suck raw fuel in there. It's not going to ignite in the combustion chamber, and then it's going to dump it into the hot exhaust. If it's hot enough, it'll ignite in the hot exhaust and you get a big backfire. So to avoid that, they started putting these fuel valves in place on the carburetor to help alleviate those issues, because it's a nice little surprise you can get at times.
This one is dual fuel, so they could use part of the changeover between gas and propane.
Yes, you're right.
Maybe how they shut the gasoline off to the car.
Yes, and so this could be bad too. But before we try to take this off, I figured we can just do a quick fuel flow test, just making sure at least we're getting fuel in there, and then if we're getting fuel right here, more than likely we're getting in here, and we'll check that just by loosening up the screw, and gas should start to come out here. And then what that would tell me is either this isn't getting actuated, so we're not getting any power to this, and or meaning that there's some kind of electric switch up there that's not working, supplying power to this to then energize this to allow fuel to go through. And that would make sense of why the customer was saying something about it would work under propane but not gasoline and so forth. With the switches in all the proper position for gasoline, we've eliminated the fact of possibly not getting spark, compression, and amongst a few other things, compression and timing. And all we know is we're just not getting fuel. That's why I like to use some starter fluid, because it's a quick test to allow you what direction you need to go, instead of doing all of these things, pulling the spark plug out, checking to see, do we have spark, now do we have compression, and all amongst all those things. So it's just a quick allows you to do a quick direction of isolating issues. I'm going to go ahead and pull this little gasket off, and I'm going to set it aside just so it doesn't fall. So now what I'm going to do is we have this fuel valve off. I'm going to turn off this fuel valve over there up in the front, and then we're just going to disconnect this fuel line. So you have this fuel line here, and then this line here is your propane and or natural gas in this case. And now all that does, there's just a big orifice right here on the inside of this carburetor. It is hard to see, but it's back in there. It's just a big hole, and all it's doing is just dumping that gas in there, bypassing the carburetor essentially, and it's just letting the fuel directly in there via propane or natural gas. So let's get this off. And here I have this kind of cover. Okay, so break that loose, and then all right, so now we are seeing gas. So we'll just do a quick flow test. So I'm going to turn this valve on. I'm going to turn it on in the front real quick, and ooh, nope, look at that. Okay, so we have a valve issue up in the front.
Gas is in it.
It is pretty full. Okay, so I've seen this before. So we're gonna plug this back in. And what it is the valve is, there's an issue with the valve. It is restricted. And I believe I have been able to fix the last one by taking it apart. But let me get that. Okay, so that's back on place. So we're not going to button all this up just yet, because I want to pull that again and we're going to check it. But we now got to go back to the front. So what I got to get access to is to this fuel valve here. So in order to do that, what we got to do is take these 8mm screws out. We should be able to get a little bit of access. They are starting to pack these a little bit more. So let me grab my little impact and break those all loose and see if I can gain some better access to it. Okay, so now what I want access to is this guy right here. So we're gonna have to pull this off. And in order to pull it off, I'm gonna put this in the stop position slash storage. I'm gonna unscrew this screw, pull this off. And as you can see what I'm talking about, this is just plastic. So if the screw is not tight, you're putting all that directly on all of this and you can start rounding it off. So I just pull that out and set that aside. And now we gotta get this off. This is where it gets a little challenging. So fuel is on, so I gotta turn that off. And we gotta disconnect this line. This is coming from the gas tank. This one here. And then, oops. There we go. And then this one is going out to carburetor. There we go. Pull those up and out. Now we're getting a little bit better access. So these are the little dip switches on both sides, telling the machine if you're running on gasoline or propane. And the reason for that is because they have some other things some other logic that happens, like the fuel solenoid turns on or off, among some other things. So basically I need to get this whole thing off, and in order to do that, looks like we have a little retainer there. We have this clip here. Unplug that.
It doesn't appear to have a fuel pump of any sort.
No, all of these are gravity fed in regards to the gas tank, because the gas tank is higher, and so it just drops down and then goes to the carburetor. That's why you normally don't see fuel pumps on a lot of these. The only time you'll see a fuel pump is if they're coming in from the top of the gas tank and pulling it up and out. Then you'll see that usually, but on these, the bung's on the bottom, and so it's usually gravity fed. Okay, so I need to grab a wrench and unscrew these so we can take this off, and then we're going to open up this fuel valve and see what's going on the inside. Let's see. So I'm not sure what size that is right offhand. That's definitely too small. Let's see. This is 7mm, and it appears to be 7mm. Okay, so unscrew that. Set the screw aside.
Is this in warranty?
Yeah.
Why not just replace the damn valve?
We can. It really just depends on what we see on the inside. Because yeah, if it's just something simple and quick, then and it's not going to have issues further down the line because of whatever fix that I may be able to do, then they're okay with it. But if there is something where I can't basically essentially guarantee that the fix that I do is going to work, then yeah, you definitely just replace it. Okay, so when you pull this off, just be careful, because on here you can see there is this little, so one, this can come off, and you don't want to mix these up. And then two, there's this, oh, they actually, so this normally can pop right off. Let me grab a screwdriver. So this here normally can just pop right off, and it probably does. It's probably just because it was screwed down, but I'm not going to pull it off. It's not necessary. But all I was getting at is I wanted to show you that when you turn this, it's going to hit the dip switches, and so you just want to make sure that you don't lose that, and then you reinstall it. Like this one, you can see in the off position, it's currently hidden in this one. So now we're going to pull this off. So this does have to come off.
You just pull the filter bowl. It's got a filter bowl just like the tank does.
Oh, it does actually. So let me pull these off.
I mean, that's just, it's going to be the valve barrel.
Yeah, I didn't realize that right offhand. And sometimes I've seen these where they just get slightly plugged up from whatever.
And it's weird because it's already gone through the one filter up the tank. This is just
yeah, there's just the strainer.
It's like some parts bin fuel valve. There's fuel in it.
So there is some fuel in it, but why is it restricted? So
compressed air solves. That's the propane, I think, that's not used. It's like a parts bin part.
So when I was blowing through here, I'm just being careful, putting my thumb over this so this doesn't go flying out. And so far when I'm feeling it, it's flowing pretty good. Now in regards to fuel, gasoline was coming out this way. So unfortunately without
that's not used. The big ones aren't used.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, small. I'm sorry. It's this one right here. You're right.
So that should go just straight through the middle.
Yep. And something doesn't feel right on that.
Well, that's where the shutoff valve's going to be. It's going to have a little nose that sticks down into that.
So we need this in the on position because we need to open this up. Okay, so I feel stuff go through there. I feel this. Okay, so like that. Ow. Oh no. That's why you got to make sure.
Lost a little screen or something.
Yep, that's right here. So the screen and O-ring. So that's what I mean, you know, keep that covered. Okay, so this is basically going straight here to the side of the casing and then filling up around here. This hole here is going straight up and out. Of course, there is a valve right here that's controlling this. And overall, I can see, I can't see through it, but I can feel, it feels just fine. And then when I put my thumb over here, it feels just fine. So I'm not sure why the flow was very low. So what we're gonna do, make sure these are clean, reinstall this, and the tapered side goes out. So on this, you can kind of see it's tapered. So goes like that, and then put the O-ring on the outside. And then before we tighten this, I'm going to put some seafoam on that. Let me grab that. And the reason why I put some seafoam on this, yep, you got to make sure it's wet, because what can happen is when you tighten this up, you don't want it to catch the O-ring and then just bind it. You want it to kind of glide over it. And then, of course, you can catch it and bind it if you over torque it. So basically, get this so it's snug and just go a little bit like so. That should be good. All right, so I have the fuel valve on. This comes in from tank. So we're gonna go from tank, which is this one here. Let's undo that so we can get better access to it. So this is your fuel line coming in. We're going to reconnect it. I'm not going to worry about this clip right now. We're just going to do a quick check to see how it's flowing out. So let me grab a little cup. I'm going to hold it over this cup. And I'm making sure I'm not holding above the tank. I know the tank, you know, has fluid probably about right here. So as long as I'm below the fluid level, it should be fine. So fuel valve's on. I'm going to turn on this valve. Let's see where we're at, what's happening. Ah, that looks good. All right, so that end is good now. So let's get this all put back together. And then this went on, oops, like so. And you got to be careful to, when you, since I turn this in the fuel on position, this dip switch is going to get pressed. And so this little piece here is in the way. So you can't just push this down. If you push it down, you're going to mess up this dip switch. Pull the switch in gently and get just behind that. And, so it's resting on that dip switch. This side, it's clear. So we're okay to put this on. All right, so now I got to reinstall this onto here. And before I do that, let me grab a couple of these, get these nuts close by. And then this is to get back on here. It's a little, actually, it's a little more of a pain when I have this fuel line connected. So I'm going to disconnect this fuel line. I did make sure the valve is off. There we go. And then making sure all of these are in its place and it's remaining. And then get that reinstalled. Just holding it down so they don't pop out of place. And get one of these just on there snug, and now I get the other ones on there. Sometimes you gotta have some little hands to get in some of these areas, it seems like. Okay, so got that one started. This one started.
You need little doll hands to get in there.
Yeah, basically.
Doll hands that can't. He's a little, he's like a little doll. This is a little doll hands, and he's like the octopus mechanic.
Yeah. Okay, and then we get these all snug, nice and snug. All right, so that's on. This was retained, this wiring was retained by this little, it's like this, but down here. So I just put that back on, and then we're gonna plug this back in. Okay, and now these fuel lines went through here. This one is carburetor, so this one goes in the back. And then this one is the gas tank, this one goes here. So before I put those on, this is still in the on position. I'm gonna disconnect the fuel line on that side, and I wanna check fuel flow, because if I am restricted, it could be because of this line, and I'm gonna disconnect it here and disconnect it from over there and blow it out with the hose. So whatever that might be in here gets, we expel that. So let's go back on this other side real quick. Start the reactor. And get this disconnected. Okay, so now Now that I have this disconnected here, we're gonna go ahead and check fuel flow. So that fuel valve is on, this one's off. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this one on and see what it looks like.
It's got a long way to go.
Ah, there we go.
It's trickling good.
So now,
It's true.
yeah, so that's what we should be expecting. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off
Now it's trickling.
and then reconnect this.
Make sure to spill that gas so we inhale it.
I know, right? That's the one thing about working on some of this stuff. It is so hard to not inhale a lot of this stuff.
You're gonna get the brain damage.
Oh yeah, some of the stuff, oh, some of the old gas and stuff, just it upsets my stomach big time. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm putting these hose clamps back on, and then I'm gonna lift this up and then get the fuel line kind of held in position, and then we can kind of get this thing back into place. So grab these here, hold my knee on there, get this socket off. I don't like running bolts until I get them at least started by hand, just to make sure they're not getting cross-threaded.
Oh, come on, just blast at max torque.
You could do that. You can force it on there. It'll stay.
Blast, blast, blast. Next guy's problem.
Yeah, it'd stay, but I hate to be the guy working on it next. And
Hopefully it's not you, right?
yeah. All right, so that one's good. There we go. So everything is reinstalled minus this fuel valve here. Well, not fuel valve, but fuel selector switch. And then I need my screwdriver here. So we know this is in the on position. So it's going to be somewhere, yep, right there. And yeah, just don't force it. It should just slide on there in its proper position. Then go ahead and get this threaded and then get it snug and then do just a little turn. And so now that is moving like it should. All right, so in order to start this back up, we need at least this carburetor secured, because if we don't, we can get air between the carburetor and the insulator and head, and yeah, you're just not going to get any fuel in there. But what I'm curious on, I'm wondering if I can turn this in the on position. Let's see if I can feel.
You can hear it.
Yeah, I can hear something. I believe I can hear it. I'm going to make sure this fuel valve is on, make sure the other fuel valve's on. What I'm wanting to do, what I'm trying to do, is have the fuel valve on, allowing fuel to go up through that main jet and into the emulsion tube. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my compressed air, being careful not to spill what little gas is in there, and I'm going to blow over this emulsion tube. I want to see if gas starts to come out. Gas comes out. So we know we are getting gas at that point. So now I feel pretty confident in putting this all back together, and hopefully she'll fire up, because before we didn't get any gas, now we get gas. So what I did there is I reinstalled the little gasket, and we'll get this line back up. And I set these screws aside. Put the 10mm nut on there. Put the 10mm nut on this side. And then there's an 8mm bolt down below, right back here. I like to get everything loose, because then I can move this around to get it kind of lined up properly. Otherwise, it's just a pain. Okay, so get that snugged up by hand first. Okay, that's snugged up by hand. Now we'll go ahead and snug these up. And then snug these normally, so get snugged up with the wrench and then just little turn. Snugged up by wrench, little turn. Now underneath, got to do the same thing for the other bolt. All right, so don't forget to reinstall this breather tube. It connects from the valve cover to the air filter housing. Plug that back in, seal that off, and I can now install that retainer for the air filter on the back side, and then put the air filter on, and then reinstall the air filter cover, and basically hooks up on the top, goes down, and run this screw down. Okay, so everything should be in its proper position. Fuel valves on, chokes on, fuel valves on here. We have it in the on position, and now we're gonna hit start. I'm gonna give it a little help me juice, just see what happens. That's interesting.
Gas?
Unless there is some bad gas in that carb. Let's just try it real quick. Okay, so we'll turn that off for a second. Let's go over here and I'm gonna bleed some of this gas out. I'm gonna drain this real quick. Yeah, it's getting gas now.
Some water.
That's what I'm starting to wonder, if now there's something in there. Okay, so I am going to loosen up that screw on the bottom of the bowl, not on the very bottom, but on the side. I'm gonna take a fuel sample. And what I did, what I'm doing is I have a cup here. I'm just gonna put underneath here.
Super clean.
Oh yeah.
Been used before.
Never been used before. And I'm gonna loosen this up.
I think we used to eat snacks out of that in the 90s.
We probably did. And oh. It looks slightly discolored, but
It's kind of yellow.
yeah, it is a little.
Because it smells weird when it's not weird smell.
Yeah.
Go.
So I'm gonna drain a little more. It didn't look like that up there.
No, it
So,
was clear. It wasn't,
yeah.
This is like golden.
Yeah, so there definitely is some kind of difference between fuel. So let's go ahead and, after draining some of that, we're gonna go ahead.
I bet it's water. Bunch of water chilling down there.
There's
The reason
something.
It's golden is because it's probably rusted out the jet. Or there's a steel screw in there.
There's something.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and choke that fuel on, turn this on. We're gonna go ahead and attempt to start again. Ooh.
Come on, engine. You can do her.
Let me try a little bit of.
Fail, brother. What's that sound?
That's the stepper.
She likes the starting fluid.
Okay, so she definitely likes the starting fluid, but I'm starting to wonder about this fuel that's in this thing. So we weren't getting fuel flow. We're now getting fuel flow. And just to confirm that again, we'll turn this off. Oops. Turn that off. I gotta tell this thing to not.
She's so sad. Doesn't want to run.
Okay, so now I have everything on. I'm gonna blow over that and just see what. Oh wait, that's interesting. So it was.
Well, now you got your fuel emulsion tube shut down by the solenoid.
Yeah, but I have everything on right now, so it should allow fuel through it, and I'm not getting any fuel. I'm barely. So that's interesting because I swear we saw that earlier. Yeah. So let's just see what happens. Okay, so it looks like there is something going on with this fuel solenoid. So we're gonna go ahead and turn off this fuel, take this back off, unfortunately. And let's check what's going on with this fuel solenoid. Make sure that's even moving because something's not right. So it's interesting, we didn't have any fuel flow. Now we got fuel flow. And then I checked it. It seemed like the fuel solenoid was working. It sounds like it, I can hear it, but something's just not right. Okay, so I'm gonna just tip that aside. You can basically pull that evap can or the tube off of that if you want, but I try to reduce the amount of work as possible. And on these, okay, so to take that off is kind of a pain. So we'll pull this gasket out and off. So on these, they get them so tight on there. If you put a screwdriver on there, you're just going to have a hell of a time and you're probably gonna round off that screw. So what I like to do is grab a little channel lock, bite on the side of the screw, make sure you only get in the screw, and break it loose. And then the same thing on this back side. The back one. Pull this out a little bit. And all I'm doing is I'm just trying to reduce from having to pull the whole carb off. There we go. So we can just get to that and see what it looks like, the fuel solenoid, and see what it looks like.
It's been filled with magic pixie dust.
Oh yeah. Okay. So grab a little paper towel for down here.
Oh, she's leaking. She's leaking. Oh Lord.
So we know we're getting fuel now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need some more paper towels. I'm gonna grab a few more. Okay.
Towels.
Oh yeah.
Oh my. Oh yeah. There you
Oh
go.
yeah. Definitely smelling them fumes now. All right, so let's pull this out and let's see what's going on with this. So this right here, it's a plunger, it goes up and down, and we'll see what direction this thing's going. So if I turn this in the on position, it goes up,
That's weird.
which is interesting. That's backwards. Now let's move Oh. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Is it confused?
So
Maybe once
check this out.
backward.
So what's interesting is we were checking fuel flow and we did get fuel flow, but look at this. If I just on this fuel or the fuel selector switch, when I just turn this just a little bit and I turn all the way over to gasoline, this is what happens. If I go to storage, that's storage, propane, that's right, because it should plug it, storage should plug it, and then I go to on, it's this, I must be barely hitting that dip switch or something.
I think they're called micro switches.
Or micro switch, I mean, not dip switch. Okay, so I have it in the right position right now. And all I'm doing, if you want to look real quick, all I'm doing is this. All I'm doing is this. So right now it's fully extended. Right now it pulled all the way in. Okay, so I'm going to reinstall this real quick with it retracted.
I bet you blast smooth, man.
And I bet you it will fire up just fine.
There's like this one, it was like this Indian guy fixing up his scooter, and that was one of the things. I think maybe it was in one of the comments. Someone said that it wasn't going to blast smooth. So the engines are gonna blast smooth.
That's funny. Okay, so.
Yeah, I'm sure it's smooth. I like
Yeah.
See that? It's not
Blast.
blasting. Right now we've got a lack of blasting. No fuel, no blasting. The problem exists with the fuel shut-off switch. And that's cool. They are doing a smart thing by closing that when it's running in propane, so they can keep the bowl full of gas.
Yep, exactly. And otherwise, what you would have to do on some of those older ones, you would actually have to run the carburetor dry. Once you run that dry, then you can switch over to propane. So real quick, what I'm going to do, just to, I'm going to turn on the fuel. And just to kind of make sure, I'm going to pull this back a little bit. You can probably see. I'm going to blow. See? And it's pulling that fuel just fine now, which is what I saw prior. So now we're going to go ahead and make sure all of this is buttoned backed up over here. So I have to have at least this bolted down. And it's just easier to put this all on. I'm just going to put the carburetor screws on just to make sure the carburetor's retained, and then we're going to attempt to fire it up before we completely button things up.
Notice this generator has a mechanical governor but electronic choke, unlike that other one that was all.
Oh, the inverter ones? Yeah, the inverter ones are different.
Well, this is this not an inverter?
Nope, these open frame ones are generally non-inverter, which are nice in terms of cost, but in terms of sine wave and sound and stuff, these are just a little bit more crude. Okay, so we have everything like it should be, minus the air filter. Is not installed, which is fine. Fuel's on, that should be retracted. It should fire up now. I'm gonna make sure choke is on. Okay, so our voltage looks good, frequency looks good, so all of that looks good. See, it may kill it. Idle's working. Of course, we can put a load on it, but right now we just trying to make sure everything's working. So now watch. So just that little bit of movement. Okay, so we do have some issues with this dip switch area. So what I'm
Micro switch.
or micro switch, not dip switch.
Dip switches are dual
The little,
package.
yeah, they're the little,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like the old computer stuff.
Yep.
Set your IRQ.
Okay, so what I'm curious on
Base memory address.
is where is that sitting? So let me grab a little crescent wrench, and what I'm curious on.
Every repair is like a Nancy Drew mystery.
Oh, sometimes you think you have it all narrowed down 100%, you're done.
Oh, you gotta chase the culprit
Please don't.
all through the fuel lines.
Yep. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave that on. Yeah, so I can hear it. Okay, so what I'm curious on is it that metal piece or is it the micro switch?
It's gotta be, that cam looked loose to me. Like it looked like it was just kind of haphazard on that shaft. And that didn't look right. I wonder if that cam is
It does look like,
I don't know what that cam is supposed to look like. You see that little cam in there? That hits the switches.
are you talking about this little guy here?
It's like a
Let's
little
try
piece of-
pulling her off.
I think that should be retained with some screws of some sort, but it's
Well, this is retained with the plastic thing. Usually this pops right off, but in this case, I've noticed it wasn't. So that could be, you gotta just, maybe it just got pushed back too far. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, I'm slowly kind of walking it. There we go. See, this is usually so. Let's see here.
that's not retained on that shaft at all. Is it missing?
No, it's retained by this here. So when you have this on, it's holding it back. But what I'm noticing is this one here is kind of bent that way, just ever so slightly. So let me just kind of flatten that out.
Blacksmithing.
Yep, so I'm gonna just take this over to my vise. I'm gonna give it a little whack, just kind of flatten that out just a little bit and see if that helps. Okay, that looks better. All right, so put this back in. And when you do it, you just gotta take care of that you're not hitting those micro switches. So this should be off. So I'm gonna rotate it just a little bit so you can see that it is just in between. And then, oh yeah, we're right there. Let me snug this. Let's see what we're at. Let's see if we can hear it. Okay, so let's try it. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna wiggle it a little bit. So that's good. Now that would make sense because I got it out off of that that switch, that micro switch. And so now if I turn it on, let's see. Yep. All right, so now we'll go ahead and reinstall. Make sure these final screws are back on, and then do one more final test. We're gonna hook up our probes outside of the gauge on there. Make sure our voltage and frequencies within spec. It should be, assuming that that gauge is right. And then we're gonna do a quick test under load with eco mode on and off, or auto idle on or off. And as long as all that checks out, then it should be good to go. So let me go ahead and button this up. So because I have this tight, makes it a little harder to line up the lower. So we're gonna loosen it. So that's the thing, is like sometimes it can be one thing, sometimes it can be a couple things. And in this case, there was a few things that were interesting that were just slightly off. We had, for whatever reason, a fuel flow issue. And then after we fixed that,
I think the fuel flow issue was that switch the whole time.
and it may have been. Well, no, because fuel flow isn't off of the dip, or not dip switch, the micro switch. The micro switch would be in terms of, oh, I see what you're talking about.
Off the fuel right at the
Yeah, but remember we pulled off the fuel line and we checked for fuel flow, and we didn't get any, and that's part of the reason why we opened that up. So everything seems like it's related in that area. So it looks like it could have been a couple little things all related to that fuel valve / micro switch assembly. All right, so now that we have that back together, I'm gonna grab my probes here and my heat gun. We tested under a load. I'm gonna grab my other Okay, so what I do, or what I like to do is hook, so I made a box that you could do this, but I actually purchased this. Basically you hook up on a 20 or 30 amp plug. It separates one leg, which is, you can see here, and then it separates the other leg. So I can test both legs. And then of course, you know, if you see 240 on there, usually it's looking at both, you're tying them, and that's how you get your 240. So this is just one way I can just double check, make sure everything's good. So let's go ahead and hook up on one side, and then we're going to go ahead and turn on the breaker, turn on the battery, turn on fuel. We're on gas, turn on fuel here, turn on choke, and start it up. So voltage and frequency is good. And it's good on that leg. We're going to switch over to watts. And then high, low, off. I'm going to turn on audio control. So sometimes I have to unplug this, but then high, low, off. We can go ahead and unplug that, turn off fuel, and shut it down. All right, so we sorted out the what looks like fuel flow issue along with the micro switch, and then we performed our test and everything, and now everything's good. So we can go ahead and write this up and return it to the customer.